Agnieszka, I guess I'm really absolutely thrilled to have Agnieszka speak with us today. So Dr. Agnieszka Olszewska Guizzo, hopefully I've said that right, Agnieszka. So Agnieszka is a landscape architect and neuroscience researcher, academic teacher and author. And she's founder and director of Neuro Landscape. So we will share all links after this. And she's the lead researcher for neurourbanism and environmental neuroscience program. And her internationally recognized research has informed policy practice in Europe and Singapore, contributing to the city in nature vision. And she's also author of Neuroscience for Designing Green Spaces, which actually I have here. So it's a good read. I would highly recommend. I'll share a link of that as well. So without further ado, Agnieszka, if you want to share.
Sure. Okay. Hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here today and also participate in that first part as well, because it gives me quite a nice sneak peek in what the real landscape architects are doing, which we as like scientists, we are a little bit disconnected from. So I really appreciate that first part as well. Welcome everyone to this talk. Titled Designing for Mental Health and Wellbeing from Contemplative.
Agnieszka, I think are you on mute?
Okay, sorry.
All right.
Okay.
I think that might have been my end. Sorry.
So once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and I also really appreciate the first part of the session, which gives me quite a sneak peek in the life of the real landscape architecture office, since we as scientists, we are a little bit disconnected from that. And Rob here just gave an excellent introduction to my background. I'll skip that. Let's get directly to the topic, which is design for mental health and well-being, which I'm sure all of you can apply to some extent in your designs. And we will talk about the evidence-based design for mental health and well-being, the Contemplative Landscape Model, which I've been working on for many years now, and also some of the scientific background for it. There will be some neuroscience as well, and I will also talk about real-world application of the research and how this can be actually applied in the landscape architecture practice. And what we look at for the future at Neuro Landscape, the NGO that was already introduced that I'm leading. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves the questions. Can space as well? So some people think that no space can be neutral. There will be always some effect. To me, in fact, the neutral effect also exists. So the landscape we experience, they can be definitely healing, or they can be as well harmful. And as landscape architects, it is quite important to realize that the design decisions have the impact on mental health or well-being of people who will be for years experiencing them, sometimes on everyday basis. So it does bring a little bit, a lot, in fact, responsibility to our design decisions. Especially if we're talking about the harmful designs and harmful landscapes, because they can be also harmful. The question is how to identify them, how to distinguish the one from another, and try to design those neutral or healing ones, or those, at the very least, let them be neutral, not harmful. And another thought here is that you probably all heard about the biophilia concept, theory, according to which humans have a very deeply set connection to nature. And throughout the history, humans have sought this like solace and rejuvenation through the natural environments, through the contact with the nature. And this innate affinity, evolutionary affinity, called biophilia, suggests that all humans, regardless of the origins, regardless of ethnicity, are inherently drawn to the world of the things that are alive and systems that are living, functioning systems. So, in fact, there's this little thought exercise I want to propose. Wherever you are, look around and try to see which elements of the environment that surrounds you right now, you can say that it's shared, it was also experienced by the humans 10,000 years ago. And which elements are those that are created by the modern life or like modern architecture? So yeah, I would like you to just look and reflect on that question. In the context of that, our brains developed and evolved in the natural environment, being surrounded with elements that we considered like under this big umbrella term nature. And those artificial things that that are majority of what surrounds us today are not familiar with the brain in the evolutionary context. The modern urban living, it does offer a lot of advantages concerning also health and well-being, such as better healthcare access, a more like safety infrastructure and so on. But at the same time, it quite harshly disconnects people from nature and experience of nature. And it's been known that busy streets, highly transformed habitats, crowdedness, segregation, constant stimulation, and also things like the architectural forms or even the Euclidean geometry that is mostly applied in the urban context are not quite familiar to the brain in that evolutionary context. And brains, of course, can adapt to things. We have, as humans, we have tremendous capabilities to adapt to different scenarios. However, it still looks like there's been a toll on our mental health and well-being that runs simultaneously with the urbanization process. And research shows that the urban residents are actually around 40% at higher risk of developing mental health disease as compared to the people living in the urban areas. And this is the outcomes of the meta-analysis, which is just shaping the scientific consensus. So once again, for almost 40% a higher risk in the urban populations to develop mental health diseases in the life course as compared to the rural population. And this is the study from 2010. Since then, things did not improve, although the meta-analysis like that is still not published, an updated one, but the evidence suggests it's not better, it's worse. Also, when we think about these things, we also have to consider different sorts of the mental health and well-being outcomes of living in the city and highly urbanized societies. The children and youth are quite big. Let's say a big group of concern. According to 2021 WHO report, around 13% of world adolescents aged 10 to 19 experience mental disorders, with anxiety and depression being the most prevalent. When we talk about mental health and urbanization, we also should consider the dementias, with the Alzheimer, the leading dementia disease, the burnout, the substance use, and of course depression and anxiety. So these all have been linked with urbanicity. So according to social ecological model of health, the living environment plays a very important role in shaping the general well-being. That includes mental health, physical health, and the social health. So living environment plays quite a big role. Therefore, we as decision makers, landscape architects, urban planners, we definitely carry some sort of responsibility in design. There is evidence for that, and the evidence is becoming quite difficult to ignore at this point. So looking for the solutions has been on the forefront of many agendas, urban agendas, and it also has been stated that the solution is in nature. The nature is well known to be the most promising component in generating the positive health effects in cities and also in rural areas if used well. So introducing nature to cities is very it has a strong health promoting component. And then the only question is that it's been quite obvious for many years, and especially to landscape architecture community. But the question remains, what nature? For example, is this landscape that you can see here in the slide, is this landscape healing? Can you tell? And if it is, how to replicate it in compact cities? Is it even possible? But maybe we can just take some specific components and features, and then some aspects of it can be replicated in the city, in the compact city context, or any household, like an everyday environment. So all these questions led me to developing that contemplative landscapes model. And contemplative landscapes are those landscapes that have some aggregated sum of features that trigger, in this level of aggregation, trigger a state of mind of contemplation that can be associated to certain brainwave pattern. And that is associated to relaxation, mindfulness, and positive emotions, also stress reduction. And these are the things that we would like to see in the urban populations, to experience, to like hypothetically to eliminate that urbanicity effect. And then the problem arises how to find them, how to identify them, and then how to design using these insights. So what makes landscape contemplative? And now we will dive a little bit deeper into the contemplative landscape model that was first introduced. It's a product of my PhD thesis that I concluded in 2016. And since then, it had a couple of versions. Here you can download a printable CLM model. It's basically a table, such as the one you see in the slide. The contemplative landscape model evaluates landscape based on 7 components that you can see here: landscape layers, landform, biodiversity, color and light, compatibility, archetypal elements, and the character of peace and silence. Each of these components is scored from 1 to 6, where the 1 is the lowest score, the lower quality, and the 6 is highest quality, highest score, indicating highly contemplative score for this category. And after having scores for the landscape view, for each of these categories, we can then derive the average score, which is the total contemplative landscape model score per landscape view. And then if we have a lot of views scored, for example, from entire area of a park or a neighborhood or any given spatial unit, we can then derive a score, total score for the whole area. Then there is special methodology for that, so that we don't miss certain areas in our evaluation. So this model has been studied with the neuroscience experiments. The most contemplative landscapes were compared with those of lower contemplativeness score and those with like very low contemplative score, like very negligible greenery at all as control, and it showed high reliability and high validity. The patterns of brain activity that I was looking at were those related to relaxation, stress reduction, and mindfulness, the pattern associated with mindfulness, as well as the positive emotions. So once we've like the series of research and experiments with the brain activity led to this classification. Landscapes that score above 4.33 points are considered highly contemplative, which means that they have high probability of the landscape seen to induce a significant positive brain response in most people. Of course, it's not going to apply to everyone, but most people will experience, or maybe subconsciously, but their brain will shift to so-called contemplative brainwave pattern. Anything below that will not achieve this effect. And I must say that most of the parks and gardens in our cities, so like generic parks, generic types of green spaces, they fall somewhere in between 3.9 and 4.3, and they indicate average scores. It's quite difficult to actually, for a space to be, for an entire park to achieve that high contemplativeness score. So going to one by one contemplative landscape features, I actually grouped them by two so that we can cover more during this short presentation. So landscape layers and compatibility. These things are about, visual experience. Starting from landscape layers, it is all about the depth of the view, whether or not our eye has a possibility to focus on the nearby elements, as at the same time within the same view we can see a far away distant elements. So to distinguish this kind of feature from others, I'm sure all of you are very skilled in recognizing that we can think of the three planes of the view, three visual distance zones, where in the nearest ones you can see the leaf and the details on the leaf. The middle ground, we would see a tree, and in the farthest layer of the landscape, we cannot see leaf or a tree shapes anymore. We just see the mass of trees next to each other, just one area of color. So then if our eyes have this ability to switch between the distance zones, then we can say this landscape has the highly contemplative value, and we would score it 6 points. So yeah, there are different explanations for different points as well, but this is mainly to explain the basics between basic feature of that landscape elements. This feature, landscape layer, is also quite important because it is directly linking with the attention restoration theory, so early environmental psychology, and especially the feature of being away, and the prospect refuge theory that also emphasizes that like long distance views and the visual comfort that it gives us, as well as savanna preference theory. So savannas and the preference that comes with savanna landscape also comes from the long distance viewing and creation of the safety through long distance views. Okay, without spending too much time talking about one feature, let's move to the compatibility. So compatibility is is all about the balance and harmony within the design. So all of you already are very familiar with this. It is basically how well the designer did. So the lack of spatial distractions, visual clutter, openings and closing of views that are worked out well, but also things like the balance between the wild and built elements. We don't want it to be too wild because then it's so-called threatening environment, and we also don't want it to be too built up. So I think we alluded, the team already alluded today to that, finding the right balance between wild and tamed nature. Compatibility feature also includes things like inner silence and stimulating the psychological introvertism, inward orientation of space that also induces that sense of introvertism. Going forward, incorporating natural landforms and fostering biodiversity benefit the environment, of course, but also visual richness and sense of connection to the wider ecosystem. So here are those two features that connect us to the biophilia theory. So biodiversity feature is not only about richness of plants and animals, but also everything that's alive in the landscape, everything that's dynamic. For example, water, it's not particularly a living organism, but it's definitely moving entity that has its life cycles and functions within the ecosystem. We also talk here about the seasonal and diurnal changes of vegetation, but also light and the sun passage over our head is also giving the landscape dynamism and life. For the landform, the smoothness of the landform, smoothness of the ground, natural topography are those things that induce the contemplative score and therefore the brain response in the landscape. So all types of natural lines versus straight lines or harsh edges, sharp edges would be would be noticed by the brain, if not by us, but definitely by the brain. And also the skyline is something important here. Any element that shifts our attention towards the sky, because the sky not only is the longest view we can afford in being on Earth, but also it is it is that, contemplative element, like we look up to the sky when we contemplate. Going forward, color and light and archetypal elements. So color and light, we also want to, we always want to prioritize the presence of warm and broken natural colors, avoiding the vivid and contrasting highly saturated colors. However, also the shade and light is very important here, because there is no color without light. There's actually, color is a very big topic that I can't even scratch the surface here. A lot of you might be familiar, probably more than I, but people write just all books dedicated to certain colors, so I don't want to even compete with that. So the visibility of sunlight and shade is also a big thing in the contemplativeness of landscape. Also, the point of view of the observer should be located in the shade, as opposed to in the direct exposition of the sun. The archetypal elements are a very interesting feature, and here we were hearing from the Arboriculture team about the trees. So a single old tree is also a very strong archetypal element. They are not only the tree, but also things like water feature, water body, any kind of water body, in fact. The path leading to the clearing, especially the path through the forest leading to a clearing, mountain, hilltop, a stone or a boulder, the desert. These are examples of nature-derived archetypes. And these archetypes are not only just, standing out, dominating elements in the landscapes, but also they elicit the strong emotional reaction among all people, as Carl Gustav Jung's claimed in his psychoanalysis. He claimed that the symbolic symbols are shared among all humans through the collective unconscious mechanism. So we might not be aware, but we do experience and perceive this special elements of landscapes deeply in our brain. Character of peace and silence, last but not least, this is very important to induce that feeling of contemplation in the space. So all things like tranquility, serenity, buffering the noise, especially if we're talking about urban parks and gardens, introduction of comfortable seating that invite rest and relaxation in the place, not just passing through the place, creation of the visual enclosure, sense of safety, contrast with the surrounding environment, but also things like no technology, so no visible antennas, infrastructures could induce deeper sense of relaxation, as well as sense of solitude. So a few words about the research behind contemplative landscapes. We did, this is actually from Singapore, the biggest study that I led. We compared the contemplative and non-contemplative landscapes with the control, that were landscapes with negligible greenery, with around 100 participants, including depressed patients. Some of the experiments were also conducted in Europe. So overall, we were using brain imaging tools like EEG and FNIRS. At the same time, controlling for different confounding factors such as environmental conditions, severity of the depression, mood, preference of the landscapes, and so on. We conducted these experiments in following the standards of neuroscience. So with the baseline, with the control, all participants were exposed to the same set of stimulation, all in the laboratory environment and also in situ in the parks. In the lab, they were watching videos from the parks that they were then going to the same parks and watching the same thing in the real life environment. So what the research shows was that here you've got 1, 2, and 3. First one is highly contemplative garden. Number 2 is a green space, but not very contemplative. It's a generic residential green space on the rooftop of one of the residential areas in Singapore. And the third is the urban space without any natural elements except for the sky. And at each of the sites, there were 3 locations, 3 viewing points. So you can see that the brain activity was different in each of the sites in terms of EEG, but also fMRIs that is using the brain hemodynamics, which is the levels of oxidation in the blood, in the blood vessels in the brain. So what we find from this study was that the contemplative landscapes are characterized by a distinctive neurophysiological signature. And this is quite, I would say that's the main finding, because this was the most difficult to prove that statistically significant differences between participants exposed to these spaces. So it is something in design that plays a role, and it is not a coincidental situation. It is statistically significant difference. Highly contemplative landscapes also caused, not correlated, but they caused improved mood and positive emotions. We also observed stronger effects in vulnerable groups. So the depressed patients that were recruited at the clinic, outpatients with diagnosed major depressive disorder, their effects were stronger. And we also noted that high CLM scores predict increased frontal alpha oscillations that are associated with relaxation, and theta oscillations that are associated with mindfulness experience. So those neuroscientific insights are quite new and quite promising when it comes to also depression therapy. And they tell us that the design actually matters for the brain. Some of the real-world application of this research, because it was in Singapore, Singapore was first to do something with the research findings. So they applied the contemplative landscape model in the design of their therapeutic gardens network. The therapeutic gardens are located and scattered around the city-state of Singapore, and they are part of parks, bigger parks, and they claim to be designed with the contemplative landscape model, and they incorporated a browser tool at their website that helps users find the nearest contemplative park, contemplative landscape near their home. In Sweden, so a little bit closer, the CLM was noticed by colleagues from the University of Swedish Agricultural University, who worked on this nature rehabilitation program, and they incorporated the CLM to evaluate systematically the nature rehabilitation providers of the Skåne region in Sweden, in order to select those that will be, get the funding to pursue the rehabilitation program from those that probably they have to still improve their space to be more healing and adjusted to patients. So to sum up, we need to come back to the initial question: can spaces be harmful or healing? And the answer is yes. Landscape can be healing, can be health promoting, and they also protect from mental health diseases. And it was demonstrated, and it is still there is mounting evidence about this from different fields, including neuroscience evidence. But not all landscapes have the same potential, of course. The most healing ones looks like they do have some of the contemplative features. And these features, as landscape architects, you probably know about them for a long time. And you probably also designed with those features in mind. So now you will know that they also work for our brain, and you can further systematize your knowledge about that aspects. So some few words. I think I'm running out of time, so I will be very fast. We are at NeuroLandscape. We are looking at developing some more hands-on tools to apply contemplative landscape model and also other tools to help cities and just any built environments to be more healthy. First one is CLASS, Contemplative Landscape Automated Scoring System. So for those who are tired of evaluating landscape with a paper-based table and just completely manually, there is this extension of CLM that is completely automated, and you just upload a batch of pictures and it will give you scores for even very large data sets of pictures. Another thing that we are working on at NeuroLandscape is the Neurourbanism Index. That is, we collected data for it using citizen science approach, going to different neighborhoods across Europe within, actually it is within Greening Cities project, and collecting a lot of this neurophysiological data and combining it into a neurourbanism index that measures well-being in place of a certain neighborhood unit. We actually presented this recently at the high-level educational congress to get a feedback from policymakers. We also are working on the mental health digital twin that will allow the reconstruction of the mental health response of the community to a certain environment based on our extensive brain data. The model is trained with this data to predict the response to the certain environment. And that's it, a couple of references. I hope we still have time for some questions. So I would like to open up for that, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Agnieszka. That was great. That's really, really interesting. Do we have any questions? I mean, I might start one off. I suppose it was on the digital twin and using AI. How useful is that going to be kind of within your work?
I mean, it's not going to be very useful for us, but maybe for urban planners or policymakers. I'm thinking that It will help to avoid mistakes, urbanistic mistakes, and it will help optimize the designs or the interventions that are planned. Instead of just trial and error, it will be now possible to test the projects before they are implemented and see if they have potential to improve anything in terms of mental well-being or just keeping the status quo. It's kind of like a diagnostic tool for the projects before they are completed, before they are, the money is spent to implement them. And that could be a promising tool for the policymakers to incorporate in their health promotion agendas, I believe. But what will they do with it? I don't know. Maybe they will use it for the campaigns.
So it might be useful as a design tool. Before it's implemented, you could actually use your model and assess, the benefits.
Yes, that's the idea. That would be what I would see. Or they just assess existing landscapes. They can compare which neighborhood is doing better than the other. Yeah.
It'd be an interesting concept. So, I mean, we're submitting for the Landscape Institute, but at the moment, you will have a board of judges that will subjectively assess the benefits of a project. But if you could do that scientifically, it would add quite an interesting element.
Yes, all these tools come from the notion that humans, our evaluation tools for landscape designs are kind of flawed, subjective. And how we measure success of design is also quite subjective. We should ask not even people, but people's brains, I believe.
Elena?
Yep. Hello, thank you so much. I was just wondering, in general, in terms of hands-on experiences, for example, you were mentioning stream and water is like a very high, but what if you can walk into the stream? I imagine it's like tripling in well-being for the brain. Like, do you assess it at all?
Well, not necessarily. It's like the archetypal elements are taken from the Jung's dream analysis and psychoanalysis. And for example, when he's talking about a water pond, the experience is different between just looking at the water pond and jumping into, like looking at it from a distance versus looking at your reflection in the mirror of water versus jumping into that water pond. So actually seeing it from the distance is most beneficial. Then it's much more beneficial than jumping, because jumping into it is like sinking in your the depths of your subconscious, which is not recommended in some cases. So it depends. There is quite a lot behind each of these symbols to unpack, and closer doesn't always mean better. Closer to it, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. We had a couple in the chat, like Yuki and Lewis were talking about. So we tend to use landscape visual impact assessment, and we have a matrix to assess landscape and the visual aspects. But it was more of a comment from Yuki. I don't know, Yuki or Lewis, would you like to expand on that if you're on?
Yeah, well, my first thought is that as far as I know, the visual assessment is more based on a descriptive, like qualitative manner, that we basically write a paragraph talking about whether the scenery is important or not. But if we have a matrix that's quantifiable, then it's more convincing, especially for the policymaker. And another thought is that because we're doing lower Thames crossing, and then we have those ancient woodland presentation to the client. And I remember clearly that our design lead asked us to add the BNG score comparison before and after at the end of our presentation, just to show the benefits our design bring. But it's purely for biodiversity, because they have a matrix to calculate that, and from a landscape perspective, we don't. So I do think if we have a reliable matrix to use, it's there's potential to make our discipline like more important, among others.
Yes, absolutely. And the CLM is can serve as such more objective scoring. However, you also need to be careful, like self-assessment might be always a little bit biased, right?
Yeah.
But it's still better than, like, if you can demonstrate a very technical non-negotiables in your design. For example, like there was clearly no long distance views in this space. Now we opened up some views, then and therefore scoring will go up, and intentionally solve some of the issues. Then I think it's as objective as it can get.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. There's so
Agnieszka,
many comments.
do you think we might get to a point, I suppose, with the brain technology where anybody can get hold of the tech, like to read your brain waves, essentially, because it looked quite complex from the image you had, but is it more accessible to the public?
Yes, I think so. I believe that technology is really expanding so fast, and then user experience also expanding so fast these days that I think in a couple of years it will be something that we now have Fitbits and Apple Watches tracking our health. It's not too far. We're not too far from when we will have the Fitbits, but for our brains, and it will be possible and quite easy to use it by everyone to track their own brain waves. Well, they're already the device you can see behind me. It's actually example of such a customer grade device that offers that. There's app together with it. And there are other devices like that. It's like quite a big market for it right now. So yeah, they just have to upgrade the space add-on for it, a landscape add-on. Will be there.
And Lewis, would you like to?
Yeah. Yeah, my point was also about landscape and visual impact, but from a different angle to Yuki. I was thinking about the preservation or conservation of features that are beneficial within the landscape that exist now, but can be damaged or removed by development. And at the moment, LVIA tends to focus on the process tends to focus on views that are of a higher value. So a view from a hilltop in the Peak District in a national park would be valued more highly than a view from a football field in an industrialized sort of town, heavily industrialized area of a town, for example. But actually, there are a lot of people who will go to that football field and never walk up a hill in a national park. And I feel like it's, from a socioeconomic point of view, those areas where you've got health deprivation and people might benefit the most from better quality landscapes, in those areas, the LVIA process tends to slightly be skewed against protecting views from those areas. For cultural reasons, which do make sense, because we have national parks for a reason. So there are good reasons behind that. But at the same time, if there's evidence saying that people in more deprived areas would benefit from the landscape around them being preserved, maybe that should be taken into account in LVA assessment.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Each of the tools that we have for landscape visual quality assessment is skewed towards something else a little bit. And to my best knowledge, there wasn't any tool that is specifically skewed towards mental health and well-being of the individual experiencing the space. And also talking about deprived areas, we are now conducting a big study, including also landscapes around in Wales. So it's one of the sites is quite near. It's a Pembrokeshire landscapes where there is a deprived or like marginalized neighborhood adjacent to the very beautiful, very contemplative landscapes. And they also have very high well-being scores, self-reported. And that's going to be quite an interesting study to compare whether, you know, how the CLM, high CLM scores correlate with the well-being outcomes of people among different European countries. And also we have some sites in the United States. So you can follow that. You can follow my NGO to hear the results. I will be happy to share when we have full results. But so far we've got a very interesting finding where in the whole neighborhood level, the high contemplative landscapes experienced in the daily basis by the participants of the surveys are associated with their mental health and well-being. So that could be also interesting finding for the deprived neighborhoods, and this could be quite a promising intervention to implement in these neighborhoods. Also very low cost intervention to just manage the landscapes properly and open the access to visual qualities that also have a protective health benefits.
That evidence would be really, really useful. I think it might shape a slightly different approach in the future. Okay.
And I mean, Agnieszka, I'm happy to share all info, articles, and everything in our information pack after. So, we got any more questions? Well, I appreciate we've got Chris.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I know I'm external and joining you today, so I really appreciate it. Thanks for the presentation and everything. But I have a question relating to the impression of CLM in constructed environments, constructed landscapes. Where I work in Riyadh, the developments are vast and the natural context is stark and would not naturally include a lot of the CLM representative images or the elements of passive interaction or views. And I'm wondering, has there been any models run on purely created landscapes with high, medium density housing developments, which are a new style of community development in Saudi Arabia? It's not something that existed previously like we would know in either the UK or Ireland or Europe. And I'm interested in that. Right.
Yeah, that's a very interesting insight. I get this question also a lot from, you know, this areas where we've got more arid landscapes, ecosystems, and, you know, desert and so on. But there there might be, so the CLM studies and the brain experiments were not conducted in these areas, but some of the features of the landscapes will still be there, regardless if there are green, a lot of green lush vegetation or not. And actually a lot of very highly contemplative landscapes are also those with no vegetation whatsoever. I personally think that green is not necessarily what makes the landscape contemplative. It's more blue, if anything. That's my personal opinion. I didn't test it, but I observed some of the, let's say, anecdotal situations. So I do believe the blue is more powerful than green. Also, the sky, sky we've got everywhere. The skyline we've got everywhere. Long distance views also the same. Desert is one of the very important, very powerful archetypal elements. It actually is, the experience of desert is one of the most powerful existential experiences. And there is a lot to play around, even in the Saudi Arabia landscapes, and there is possibilities to make these landscapes very contemplative as well. I don't know if that answers your question, or
Yeah, no, it does. It's really interesting. One of the taglines that keeps getting repeated here, and it's repeated without a full understanding of what it actually is a quality of life in development, or quality of life in generation. And there's no tangible measure for that at the moment that I'm aware of. And what I've been trying to do in, well, the very limited research I've done into what you've done and the CLM is to try and draw some level of tangibility between both. But my impression of the CLM is that it's quite passive in nature, and landscape that's viewed and interacted with from a passive point of view, as opposed to a residential development, the scale of maybe 10 million square meters, give or take, and the level of development that takes place in a community like that without open options for walkability, or without easy options for walkability, easy options for public realm, for time spent in public realm, and how nightscape affects in terms of CLM, because it's a major part of the activation here.
Right. Yeah, well, CLM is definitely calibrated to, I guess, the smaller scale, because it always has to consider the eye level ground view of a single viewer. So it's impossible to really make like a master plan, like a huge area without design, without considering that each viewpoint kind of scale. So that's that, and I think that's also, I would argue, it's recommended in any design to also to consider each individual viewpoint as opposed to any sort of cookie cutter approach for creating huge megalopolis that are outside of human scale. So yeah, I would advocate for always including the single viewpoints and analyze what actual personal experience with their senses. When it comes to the nighttime, it is a missing part in terms of CLM. In fact, a very good idea for further research and developing the CLM also at night. So thanks for bringing up this idea.
Oh, thank you. It's really interesting. As I said, it's a subject of great interest in, and trying to apply some sort of quality to design approaches here is a challenge. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your insight from the other side of the world as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think we've overrun a bit, but well, thank you very much, Agnieszka. That was really enlightening,
Thanks.
and I will share all information beyond this. And thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so
thank you.
much. Have a
Thank you
good
to all
day.
attendees. Will do.